Hi everyone, welcome back. I am here to be watching and reacting to lore from Vati about Elden Ring's lore, and I'm very excited to check this out. I'm going to be doing this before getting further into the DLC, and so let me know how much of the lore, like how many different videos and stuff you'd recommend I check out prior to the DLC, because I don't want anything spoiled for what I'm going to experience in the DLC. But if it's lore from the main game prior, then I can and I want to. So let me know. You guys comment down below, and that will depend on what I check out prior to going through my DLC journey. But yeah, I've just started the DLC, but I've only done like one episode so far. But I probably haven't posted it yet. This might come first. And then I've also been playing Night Rain a little bit in my spare time. So I am fully in the world of Elden Ring right now. I am on all cylinders in the Elden Ring universe. So I'm ready to dive in even deeper, and hopefully I can learn different things that match up with what I'd written in my notes and make it make more sense and be elaborated on. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me on this. I hope you enjoy, and please be sure to leave a like. Definitely subscribe, because there's a whole lot more gameplay and lore for me to react to and play. So yeah, let's get to it. Okay. And I'll also leave this video linked in the description for you guys to check out. Okay.
Our story doesn't begin in the lands between. It begins in the cosmos, far away, with an outer god called the Greater Will.
Ooh, okay.
There are a lot of outer gods mentioned in Elden Ring. You can think of these kind of like the Great Ones of Bloodborne. They're distant beings, they're all-powerful, and they're quite unknowable by design.
Mm-hmm.
But many of these outer gods want to make their presence felt in the world.
Cool.
The Greater Will, maybe most of all. To this end, it sent a golden star hurtling towards the lands between. The Elden Star's incantation tells us that this golden star was bearing a beast, an Elden beast. The Elden Remembrance calls it a vassal beast of the Greater Will.
Yeah, vassal
If you
beast.
didn't know, a vassal is someone who holds land on behalf of their overlord. Obviously, this is fitting in this case, because the Elden Beast occupied the lands between on behalf of the Greater Will, and was a living incarnation of the concept of order.
That's cool.
As such, this
The
beast
Golden
would
Order.
later become the Elden Ring. The Elden Ring itself is made up of runes of power, some great, some small, that together represent a sort of logic for the world to follow. Thus, the Elden Ring represents order. The true nature of this order is a subject of constant debate and research undergone by fundamentalists. But two of the key fundamentals are the laws of causality and regression. You can think of the law of causality as cause and effect, where actions have consequences, and those consequences are new causes that branch out into infinity. These are the relationships between things. Then there's the law of regression that states that all things eternally yearn to converge and return to their roots. Fittingly, then, the Elden Ring is housed within the Erdtree, which
That's cool, because then it's both the branches and the roots.
But it's very important to stress that life in the lands between did not begin with the Erdtree, the Elden Ring, or the Elden Beast. No, the lands between were occupied well before the Greater Will came.
Okay.
There were other beings here. There were other factions here. There were other gods here.
Other gods?
And there was even another great tree here before the Erdtree.
Huh.
And this is where a huge twist regarding the Erdtree comes in. So there are incantations in the game called aspects of the Crucible. According to their descriptions, these are manifestations of the Erdtree's primal vital energies. And I quote, "They are an aspect of the primordial crucible where all life was once blended together." But how could all life be blended together in the Erdtree if the Erdtree appeared after life existed? Well, there can only be one answer, right? That the Erdtree is a parasite, and it took over a tree that existed here before. This ancient tree was called the Great Tree.
The Great Tree.
So the Great Tree was almost certainly the location of this primordial crucible, and it must have been a very powerful primordial force for the Greater Will to have commandeered. It might even be the reason the Lands Between is important to the Greater Will in the first place. It also
This is where the Great
explains
Tree
why spells and enemies related to the
existed.
Great Tree's Crucible would eventually be looked down upon. For example, the Knot Talisman is fashioned from a knotted vestige of the Crucible, and it was considered a signifier of the divine in ancient times, but is now increasingly disdained as an impurity as civilization has advanced. Enemies related to the Crucible are the Omen, the Misbegotten, and the Crucible Knights, and all three of them would be shunned, enslaved, or imprisoned. Those who speak for the Erdtree don't want you to know its roots, so to speak.
Interesting.
According to the spell, protection of the Erdtree, in the beginning everything was in opposition to the Erdtree, but through countless victories in war, it became the embodiment of order.
Yeah, it took over as order.
In Marika's own words, the Erdtree governs all. The choice is thine. Become one with the order, or divest thyself of it, to wallow at the fringes, a powerless upstart.
But the Greater Will needed more than a big tree. It needed loyal agents in the Lands Between.
Which is very like a parasite. You're part of the hive mind,
who are its envoys. The Two Fingers heirloom has a weird picture of them, but it reads, of course, fingers cannot speak, yet these are eloquent. Persistently they wriggle, spelling out mysteries in the air. Thus did we gain the words of our faith. These words are interpreted by the finger readers. These are the undying old crones that you would have found throughout the Lands Between. They pass down the wisdom of the Two Fingers, or at least they used to.
Your fingers, please, your fingers.
Yeah, they creepily want to see your fingers too.
Most of them appear to have lost their purpose, and they're desperate to read your fingers and tell you annoying riddles, since their two fingers are likely dead. And yes, of course, there are multiple sets of Two Fingers. You would have found their corpses on the tops of the divine towers. Atop these towers, you loot the fingers in order to activate the true power of a great rune. Specifically, though, you are giving benediction back to your great rune. You're taking a blessing back from the two dead fingers, essentially.
That originally
this is just one of many blessings that the Two Fingers can bestow, and my point is kind of that the Two Fingers clearly have more than just influence. They have real power on some level. The Greater Will needs these powerful envoys and agents because while it's obviously incredibly powerful, it does seem limited by a few things. First is space. The Greater Will didn't come to the Lands Between itself. It sent an elden beast to do its bidding instead. Second is time. There is a moment later in the game where your pair of Two Fingers go still because they're forced to commune with the Greater Will for guidance.
When they are finished, the fingers will again offer their guidance. But thousands, if not tens of thousands, of moons must first pass. No matter for me. But you, how will you ever manage the wait?
So the Greater Will needs a physical manifestation of order. It needs envoys to convey its will, but what it also needs is a god. Introducing Marika the Eternal.
Marika the Eternal.
I have this utterly enormous mind map of Elden Ring's lore, and there's a reason she's at the center. She's essentially the equivalent of Gwyn from Dark Souls, except unlike Gwyn, Marika didn't just crawl out of the dark and find power. To an extent, it seems like she earned it. We don't know much about her origins, except that she is of the Numen race, which is actually an origin that you can choose in the character selection screen. Numen come from outside the Lands Between, and are supposed descendants of denizens of another world, long-lived but seldom born. At some point, Marika was chosen as an Empyrean. What is an Empyrean? Well, an Empyrean is a being chosen by the Fingers as a candidate for godhood. As an Empyrean, Marika received the aid of a shadow to do her bidding. So what is a shadow? Well, it's a wolf, shadowbound to its Empyrean by the Two Fingers. Luna Princess Rani is another example of an Empyrean with a shadowbound beast. You would have met Blythe. These creatures are the Empyrean's very own shadow. They are completely loyal to their needs and, by definition, incapable of treachery. Marika's shadow was a beast called Maleketh.
Oh, so
Every
that belonged
Empyrean
to
uses their
Malekith.
shadow in different ways, but Marika's
That's
sole
Marika.
need of her shadow was as a vessel to lock away destined death. So what is destined death? Well, according to Enya, it's the rune of death.
The rune of death goes by 2 names.
Okay.
The other is destined death.
We mentioned earlier that the
Okay.
Elden Ring is made up of runes, and at some point, maybe when she was chosen as a god, Marika plucked the rune of death from the Elden Ring. She gave the rune of death to Malekith, her totally loyal shadow, who bore a black blade imbued with this rune. It's kind of genius, really. In a single act, she removed the concept of death from the lands between, while also commanding total control of death through her shadow, who could deliver it at her whim.
Yeah, at her whim, because she's
Now,
kind of in
some
control
of you might
Malekith.
be asking, if death is removed from the lands between, how come I can kill this dog?
No!
First off, shame on you. Second,
Exactly,
from
shame
a lore
on you.
point of view, that dog isn't really dead. It's simply in the process of its spirit, or its soul, returning to the Erdtree.
Yes.
Catacomb dungeons, for example, are specifically constructed
Milena said
near the
that as
roots of
well.
the Great Tree for this reason, so that the Erdtree can reabsorb their ashes back into it. This process replaced the concept of a death that you were destined to have. But this random spirit outside of a catacomb dungeon says it best.
Yeah, it's
As another
called
example
you.
of this theory, when you kill a major boss, you receive a remembrance of them. These are spirits, and they are hewn into the Erdtree. In this way, thanks to the Erdtree's grace, their spirits are immortalized, in a sense.
Yeah.
This new form of death also explains what's happening when you summon spirits.
From ash and return to the Erdtree.
However, some spirits never return to the Erdtree, and they rise within death as corpses
Yeah.
or skeletons
And
instead.
have like an eternal kind of... One of
So
the...
this was the new order, and it's important
those, like,
to stress
ghostly
that it was in
figures
this
were saying
moment, when the
that
rune of death
she was in
removed,
pain and
when
having
destined
this
death
eternal
was taken,
suffering, so she
this
didn't
is when
return to the
order
Erdtree.
became the Golden Order.
The Golden
The
Order.
forbidden shadow plucked from the Golden Order upon its creation.
Specifically, this was Marika's Golden Order. So not only did she become a god and a vessel for the Elden Ring, she became renowned as Marika the Eternal for her removal of destined death. It was a
Right.
huge part of her character and her reign as well.
She had
However,
caused
Marika
that
had more than just
change.
death to conquer. She had wars to fight, as the world was occupied by many forces that could threaten her Golden Order. There was war with the Stormlord, who likely ruled over Stormvale, and there was a war with the Giants, who were masters of a flame that could burn the Erdtree. There was war with the ancient dragons, who incidentally had stones that could twist time and thus slay a god. And finally, there was war brewing with the Carrion royalty, who had previously obeyed laws which contravened the Golden Order.
And they had
Thus,
a
sort
lot
of
of
similar to
trolls
how
on
the
their
Greater
side as
Will
well.
needed an Empyrean to enforce its will, Marika herself needed someone to wage war. So, there was to be a husband, a consort, an Elden Lord. The man chosen was Horalu, a ferocious warrior who became known as the Lord of the Battlefield. His crown was warranted with strength, and while it was for this strength that Marika married him, he was also required to take a vow to conduct himself as a lord. To suppress the ceaseless lust for battle that raged within, Horalu took the beast regent Sarosh upon his back. You'll notice this is another example of a beast being given for the purpose of serving order.
Okay.
Thus,
Kind
in
of
this
like a
moment,
Malekith.
he went from being Horalu, warrior, to Godfrey, the first Elden Lord, consort to Queen Marika, and
Yeah.
a certified demigod.
Okay.
Godfrey
But
and
before
Marika had
Godfrey,
3
he
demigod
was
children
Horalu.
together. There was Godwyn the Golden, who you saw being killed in the opening trailer, and there were also the reviled Omen twins, Morgoth, who guards the Erdtree, and Mohg, who became Lord of Blood. You might think that Godric was another demigod child,
Yeah,
but
I
he
thought-
actually wasn't. Instead, he was probably descended from Godwyn. Anyway, we'll talk about the
okay.
demigods more in detail in another
didn't know
video,
that
so
about
subscribe
Godric.
for that.
Okay.
But for now, just know that Godfrey and his offspring were the first demigods,
Yeah.
henceforth known as the Golden Lineage.
Because he
In his
was
wars,
married
Godfrey
to
led his 16
Marika,
Crucible Knights into
became a
battle,
god.
who were named so for they fought with the primordial powers of the Erdtree. Their incantations were aspects of the Crucible itself, and they likely fought giants, dragons, the Stormlord, and more to usher in their age, the age of the Erdtree.
In Marika's own words, "Hark, brave warriors. Hark, my lord Godfrey. We commend your deeds. Guidance hath delivered ye through each ordeal to the place ye stand. Put the giants to the sword and confine the flame atop the mount.
Yeah.
Let a new epoch begin, an epoch glistening with life. Brandish the Elden Ring for the age of the Erdtree."
The Erdtree would go on to be largely seen as a blessing for all of those in the lands between,
Yeah.
especially those close to it in Lanedell, the capital
those who,
city
like,
of the Erdtree.
are praying
the tree
to it
bestowed blessings. For example,
around the
the
world.
dew that dropped from its branches were like jewels. It loomed overhead as a constant reminder of order, and its roots reached far and wide, relieving many of the burden of death. In fact, Erdtree burial was one of the highest honors a hero could receive. One by one, the previous factions of the world fell. The giants were put to the sword, and their fell god was killed by Marika herself. The ancient dragons broke down the walls of Lanedell, but met fierce retaliation. However, I think the House of the Erdtree encountered the most trouble against the land to their southwest, Leonia. Here, the House of the Moon repelled their offensives time and time again. And I mean that literally, because there was not just one, but 2 wars fought here. And in both
Two
of
wars.
these, there was no victory for the Golden, nor for the Moon. And I suspect it was probably because of these lobsters. These damn things can snipe you from like a mile away.
They do
and
hit
it's
you from
bullshit.
so
Actually,
far.
it was probably because of the Carrion Knights, who,
Okay.
according to their weapons, were able to wield sorcerous battle skills,
Glintstone
and despite numbering
stuff.
fewer than 20, this power made them a match for
Fewer
even
than
the champions
20?
of gold in battle. These enchanted
How the
knights were anointed by the Lunar Queen, a young
Rennala.
astrologer who went on to establish the House of Caria as royalty in this land. With her bewitching lunar magic, she won over the Academy of Raya Lucaria, where glintstone sorcery was studied, and
And they bonk you on the
united
head.
the Carian royal family and the learned scholars of Raya Lucaria defended their home from the golden aggressors. At the head
Headbutt.
of this great golden army was Radagon.
Lord Radagon was a great champion, possessed
Pope.
of flowing red locks. He came to these lands at the head of a great golden host. When he
was
met
he
Lady Rennala in battle,
Another
These
version
2
of
champions
Marika?
clashed, fell in love,
So when I
and
fought them at
joined
the
their
end-
houses.
Radagon once cleansed himself with celestial dew, repented his territorial aggressions, and swore his love to Rennala. The order of the Erdtree and the fate of the moon were conjoined, and all the wounds
That
of
brought
war
peace to
forgiven.
both.
You might think it strange that the Greater Will would permit this union, but it's not too odd, all things considered.
I mean, if they
As
weren't
with
winning
most
the wars.
FromSoftware games, sorcery and faith are just 2 sides of the same coin, and
Yes.
both of these powers stem from the cosmos. Radagon and Rennala were known to have 3 children together. Lunar Princess Rani, who inherited her mother's propensity for lunar magic.
Love Rani.
Radan, who took after his father Radagon
Oh.
and would go on to master gravitational
I did not
magic.
know Radan
and
was-
Rykard, who pioneered new hex sorceries and would go on to
one of
feed
their
himself to a great serpent.
Yeah.
It follows
Okay.
that at some point after this, Marika began to harbor
It's all with
doubts.
ours. Radan,
Doubts
Rani,
about the Golden Order
Rykard.
that she had had a hand in creating.
In Marika's own words, "I declare mine intent to search the depths of the Golden Order through understanding of the proper way. Our faith, our grace is increased. Those blissful early days of blind belief are long past. My comrades, why must ye falter?"
And it's at this point that we should talk about Marika's motivations. Her
I would love
character.
to.
This is surely going to be one of those huge points of debate in the coming years, but
because that's
for
what
now,
I'm
my
really
working theory is that
fascinated by.
she wanted to discover the truth behind order and the truth behind the greater will, and she believed that bonds had to be broken so that they could be better understood. She believed that there was great meaning to be found in hardship.
Queen Marika has high hopes for us, that we continue to struggle unto eternity.
For Lord Godfrey,
pretty
his
dark.
struggle ended at the end of his campaigns. According to his armor, he led the war against the giants, faced the Storm Lord alone, and then there came a moment when his last worthy enemy fell, and it was then, as the story is told, that the hue of Lord Godfrey's eyes faded. In truth, he was robbed of his grace. Then Marika sent him away.
My lord, and thy warriors, I divest each of thee of thy grace.
Wow.
With thine eyes dimmed, ye will be driven from the lands between. Ye will wage war in a land afar,
Okay, so we went to
where
a different
ye will
land.
live and die.
This became known as the Long March of the Tarnished, as Godfrey and his tarnished descendants walked away from the lands between. But Queen Marika absolutely had a plan here, that Lord Godfrey and his descendants would one day return stronger,
Yeah.
having struggled outside of grace.
Then,
Interesting.
after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong
So she
in the
always
face
wanted
of death,
the Tarnished to brandish
warriors
the
of
Elden
my
Ring.
lord, Lord Godfrey.
Soon after, she found a new husband. Either that or a new husband was found for her.
When Godfrey, first Elden Lord, was hounded from the lands between, Radagon left Rennala to return to the Erdtree capital, becoming Queen Marika's second husband and king consort, taking the title
Yes, it-
of Second Elden Lord.
Second Elden
The
Lord.
mystery
And then did he
endures
merge
to
with
this
her?
day as to why Lord Radagon would cast Lady Rennala
And
aside,
broke her heart.
and moreover, why a mere champion would be chosen for the seat of Elden Lord.
Whatever the case, as a part of this union, Radagon's prior 3 children with Rennala became demigod stepchildren, granted grace thanks to their new family tree.
Oh,
Rennala was
And that's why
broken by this,
they were given the
and
two
so was her
fingers.
country, Leonia. The Queen's set reads, when Rennala, head of both the Academy of Raya Lucaria and the Carian royal family, lost her husband Radagon, her heart
she
went
was
along with him.
broken.
And then those at the Academy realized that Rennala was no champion after all. In the wake of Radagon's betrayal and Rennala's poor judgment, Leonia struggled with civil war, with the Academy of Raya Lucaria on one side and the Carian royals on the other. And it's here, during the age of the Erdtree, that Lunar Princess Rani, daughter of Rennala and Radagon, stole a fragment of the Rune of Death.
It happened during the golden age of the Erdtree,
How did she
long
do
before
that?
the Shattering of the Elden Ring. Someone stole a fragment of the Rune of Death from Maleketh, the Black Blade.
As mentioned previously, Maleketh was Marika's shadow,
Yeah.
and he had sealed destined death in a black blade. Then a fragment, only a fragment, of this Rune of Death was stolen. And once this happened, Maleketh went a step further in protecting destined death. He bound the blade within his own flesh, such that none might rob death
Any
ever again.
further. Yeah,
It was too
okay.
late, however. This fragment of the Rune of Death was used immediately, that night, to kill a demigod, Marika's own son, Godwyn the Golden.
That was the first recorded
That's how
death
he
of
was
a
the first one
demigod
to
in
die.
all history, and it became the catalyst. Soon, the Elden Ring was smashed, and thus sprang forth the war known as the Shattering.
Interesting.
Now, there is a lot of really credible evidence that Marika was behind this plot to have a fragment of the Rune of Death stolen. There's
But to
also
kill
a
her
ton
own
of
kid?
evidence that Marika is behind the entirety of your tarnished quest. But
Yeah.
we'll talk about that in another video. For now,
That she
all you really
planned
need to know,
everything from the
in terms of the
start?
timeline at least, is
Okay.
this. After the marriage of Marika and Radagon, and after a fragment of the Rune of Death was stolen, Marika went on to shatter the Elden Ring, and Radagon attempted to repair it. To no avail. The Elden Ring had been broken into runes, some great and some small.
You know, it's said that Lord Radagon harbored a secret. A famed sculptor of the Erdtree capital was once summoned to render Lord Radagon's likeness in giant stature, when he glimpsed the skeleton in Radagon's closet. And as such, it's said the great statue harbors his secret too.
Of course, the huge twist in Elden Ring is that Radagon is Marika.
That's what I thought.
Or depending on what you believe, he became her.
Yeah, or
She knew it was
became-
going to happen.
In Marika's
like,
own
fused.
words, O Radagon, leal hound of the Golden Order, thou art yet to become me.
Yeah,
Thou art yet to become a god. Let us be shattered, both. Mine other self.
You can tell when
Self.
FromSoftware is keeping something a little bit open-ended, and of everything in Elden Ring's lore, this will also go on to be one of the biggest unknowns as we move forward.
Because I was
For
so
example,
confused when I
the
was doing it. I
wording,
was like,
thou art yet to become me,
that's both
reinforces
Marika.
that Marika and Radagon were two separate entities before the Shattering.
Yeah.
However, in
became
contrast,
one.
there is also evidence that Radagon was always part of Marika.
Oh.
For example, Enya says that
The demigods are each and all the direct offspring of Queen Marika.
but how can this be if Radagon married Rennala and had those demigod children? The only way that makes sense is if Radagon was always Marika and he just went over there to seduce Rennala long ago. I'll present
To
more
lead
concrete
to what
theories
later
in the future,
comes.
but on this matter, the most important thing is, what do you think? While you can figure
is
out a
interesting.
ton of Elden Ring's story, not all of it is open to interpretation. Certain things are, and this is one of them. And
Cool,
your
that she
interpretation is
either
a big part
could
of
have
what
been
makes this
Radagon all
story
along,
special.
or they fused
At
after
any
the
rate,
Shattering.
the union of Radagon and
Interesting.
Marika seems to be a union of two fundamental opposing laws of the Golden Order. We mentioned these laws
Maybe she
earlier,
used that
actually.
to figure
There
out
is
the truth,
law
like
of
she was
causality,
seeking all
and
along.
Marika is an agent of cause and effect.
Yeah,
And
so by
there's the
bringing
law
both
of
those
regression,
opposing
as Radagon is a character who aspires to
things
be
together.
complete and regress together. So I have a theory that forcing these two beings that represent these concepts
Yeah.
together would have corrected Marika's deviance. But even so, she was imprisoned in the Erdtree for the crime of the Shattering.
Marika's trespass demanded a heavy sentence. But even in shackles, she remains a god and the vision's vessel.
The conjoined Radagon and Marika even had two demigod children of their own, Mikola and Millennia.
Yeah,
These two
Nikolai.
children were born afflicted. Mikola was cursed with eternal childhood, and Millennia
Eternal
harbored
childhood?
a
Oh,
horrific rot
I didn't
within.
know that. I know
Even
she
so,
had rot.
These two children were both chosen
she
as
was brutal.
Empyreans. They were immensely sacred beings and
Yeah.
eligible to inherit godhood from
Yeah.
the Greater Will. Perhaps the Greater Will was just desperate to find a worthy successor, and indeed in the Shattering War to come, many would try to claim the shards of the Elden Ring, and they would try to take the throne, including, of course, the Tarnished, who returned from their long march at long last.
That's
Which
cool.
we'll talk about in the next main lore video.
Okay.
I should probably also mention here that if you become a patron, you'll see upcoming lore videos early, as that's one of the rewards you get if you pledge to the $3 tier. And if you think my channel really adds a lot of value to the Souls games for you, to the point where you
definitely
pledge
does.
$20, then in this new tier, you'll receive a new mug every 3 months that has a unique design on it, to do with the games by FromSoftware. There are 4 to collect. The first one you'll get is inspired by Dark Souls, then Elden Ring, then Sekiro, and finally Bloodborne. And they all have fantastic art that I worked on with an amazing artist named Chu. But anyway, I figured this is the right place to end this video because the information here is going to be overwhelming. I bet it probably was too overwhelming, you know? It took me
Already?
ages to commit these names and the relationships they had with other characters to memory, so I hope you guys are doing all right.
That is
One thing
interesting.
that helped me a lot was that we designed an enormous mind map with pretty much all of Elden Ring's lore, all of its item descriptions, all of its dialogues, all of the relationships
massive.
between characters that we can think of. We added all of this together, and it helped a ton in learning about the story and visualizing it all. And one day I will make this asset available to you all, because I think after doing it, I think this is the quintessential way to piece together the story, and I think giving you guys this asset eventually will make that accessible for people. So I'm really excited about that. I want to thank Absa and Zard for accepting the paid task of helping me put all the raw data into this mind map so that I could better understand everything. I want to thank Paragod for fulfilling all of my footage requests and creating so many cinematic scenes for this video and for you all to enjoy. And I last of all want to thank John Devlin for the incredible thumbnail. And of course, thank you for watching. There are some really exciting things ahead, and I actually believe this might be the best story that FromSoftware have ever put together. I just think not only are there so many amazing item descriptions, but so many of them are impactful. There are so many moments where you piece together the story and have like a eureka moment, and I'm enjoying it so much.
I did have quite a few of those,
I'm going to go and play the game a little bit because I've been editing this video for too long. So, see you next time.
Okay, everyone, that was Elden Ring's lore explained. Like I said, let me know if there are specific videos you think I should experience before continuing the DLC, before getting any further into it, because I know there was a break like between the main game and DLC releasing anyways. So that was really fascinating to have my speculations almost like confirmed in that way. Clearly it's just such a great story that it leads you to come to this conclusion regardless, but it's so cool. And I like the thought that she was Radagon all along. I like that idea, and I kind of subscribe to that, but I like that it's also open to they just only fused after the Shattering. That is a really cool concept as well. And it's cool for me to now piece together which demigods were whose kids. That actually makes a lot of sense, because I knew Miquella was one of Marika's kids, and I did know that Miquella was Melania's brother, and and now I know that Radahn, Ranni, and Rykard were all siblings as well, so that's really interesting, and that Malenia and Radahn had like a feud where they were fighting each other as well to try, I guess, prove their strength and their ultimate fighting prowess, and they were all on a journey to become gods themselves. So, and they all went in such different directions, which I really like. Like, that makes me appreciate even more why Rykard like subjected himself to becoming a part of the Great Serpent, and why Radahn was trying to be like a champion among all champions, almost similarly to his father. And Ranni completely went against the Erdtree and the Golden Order, and knew that they wanted her to like play this game and the two fingers and everything, but she went against that, which is so intelligent for, you know, such a young Empyrean. And yeah, anyways, there's so much I could go on about how eye-opening that was and how interesting this lore is, but I will keep exploring further with the lore. So let me know what you think. And I'm honestly like kind of proud of myself for everything that I wrote down in my notes, because a lot of this made sense, and there was definitely a lot of parts I did not know and I had explained fully to me, but a lot of the pieces made complete sense because of the notes and the lore that I had built in my notebook. So heck yeah. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to leave a like, check out Vati's video and subscribe to him if you're not already. I'm sure you are. And yeah, I will see you all in the next one. Bye.